The best kept secret at Lincoln High walked those halls for 30 years in the same 12-year-old Camry, ate the same sad little sandwich at his desk every day, and let every single person assume he was just scraping by like the rest of them. His name was Joel. He taught chemistry. And the week he retired, a colleague found out, almost by accident, that quiet, unremarkable Joel was sitting on more than $1.2 million. Nobody saw it coming, because Joel had committed the one unforgivable sin in American life. He looked completely normal while being quietly enormously rich. Meanwhile, across town, a guy named Trevor, who out-earned Joel every single year for 3 straight decades, is standing on the deck of a boat he still owes money on. He named it the Freedom. Right now, he's refreshing a bank app, staring at a retirement account with about $40,000 in it. Same 30 years. One quiet millionaire, one loud budget. And the reason for the gap between them is so boring it's almost insulting. My name is Nick, and today we're figuring out why most people never become millionaires and why some people quietly, boringly, absolutely do. If you've ever looked at your bank account and wondered whether you're doing something fundamentally wrong or whether the whole game is just rigged against you, stick around because the answer is a little bit of both, and the math tells a story nobody wants to say out loud. Now, before we get into it, let me be crystal clear. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. This is just what happens when you spend way too much time staring at the same wealth data everyone else scrolls past. Let's start with a number that sounds like great news and is actually a magic trick. The average American household is a millionaire. Seriously, the mean household net worth in this country is right around $1 million, $59,000. So on paper, the typical American family has crossed the $1 million line. Congratulations to all of us, I guess. Except that's not the typical family at all. Because the median household, the one standing dead center, the one where half of everybody is richer and half is poorer, that household is worth about $192,000, not $1 million. That gap, the gap between $1,059,000 and $192,000, that entire chasm, is what this whole video is about. Here's why those two numbers are so far apart. Averages lie when the room is lopsided. If you put 9 regular people in a bar and Jeff Bezos walks in, the average net worth in that room is suddenly about $40 billion, but not one of those 9 people can afford the tab. Remember that. The lopsided bar trick, it's going to show up again. A handful of enormously wealthy households drag the average up into Fantasyland, while the actual middle sits way, way down below it. The top 1% of households own 31% of all the wealth in the country. The bottom half own about 2.5%. So when someone tells you the average American is doing fine, what they're really describing is the top 15% wearing the whole country as a costume. And it gets worse when you look at what that median net worth is actually made of. Strip out home equity, the value locked inside a house you still have to live in, and the median household is worth about $66,000. That's it. That's the real, liquid, spendable cushion for the family in the exact middle of America. $66,000 standing between them and disaster. So here's the real question. If the middle is that thin, how does anybody get to the other side? How does a Joel happen? Because millionaires absolutely exist. There are roughly 24 million of them in this country, more than any nation on Earth. Something is clearly working for some people. So let's talk about who those people actually are, because I promise you it is not who you think. When you picture a millionaire, you probably picture Trevor's boat. You picture inherited money, a trust fund, a fancy title, a startup that popped. So let's just kill that image right now. The largest study we have on this, a survey of over 10,000 American millionaires, found that 79% of them received exactly zero inheritance. 89% are first-generation rich. Nobody handed them a head start. They built the whole thing from scratch. And their jobs? This is my favorite part. The top 5 careers among millionaires in that study were engineer, accountant, teacher, manager, and attorney. Teachers outranked doctors. Let that sit for a second. The person grading chemistry quizzes is statistically more likely to become a millionaire than the person doing your annual physical. 1/3 of those millionaires never earned six figures in a single year of their entire working lives, not once. 93% said they got there through plain, unglamorous consistency, not a big salary. And most of them didn't go to some elite school either. The majority came out of ordinary public state universities, the same ones sitting off the highway in your state right now. There was no secret door and no cheat code, just a normal person with a normal job who did one specific thing differently, and we're about to get to exactly what that thing was. This is the thing that breaks people's brains, so let me say it plainly. Income is not wealth. They are two completely different things, and confusing them is the single most expensive mistake in personal finance. There's an old framework that splits people into two groups. You've got the income statement affluent, and you've got the balance sheet affluent. The income statement affluent look rich. Big salary, big house, big truck, the whole performance. But their net worth is a rounding error, because everything that comes in immediately goes back out. That's Trevor. He didn't have a money problem. He had a keeping money problem. The balance sheet affluent are the opposite. They might look aggressively normal, modest car, modest house, nothing on them worth stealing. But their net worth is enormous because for decades they quietly kept a chunk of everything they earned. That's Joel. Nobody at his school thought of him as wealthy. He drove a 12-year-old Camry and brought his lunch. He just happened to be a millionaire the whole time and told absolutely nobody because that's how it usually works. Here's what that difference actually looked like in real time. Every couple of years, Trevor got a raise. A good one. One year it was $12,000 and Trevor did what felt completely reasonable, which was let his life grow to fit it. That $12,000 raise quietly became about $400 more a month in truck payment, a slightly bigger apartment, nicer dinners he genuinely earned. By December, the raise was gone, absorbed, invisible, and Trevor honestly could not have told you where it went. He did that with every raise for 30 years. Joel got smaller raises, and every time one landed, he did something almost aggressively boring with it. He nudged up one automatic transfer, the one that pulled a little money out of his checking account on payday before he ever saw it, and then he forgot the transfer existed. That's the whole divergence, right there, $400 at a time. One man let the money drift toward his lifestyle, the other set it once to move toward his future, and then went to go teach a room full of teenagers about covalent bonds. So if it's not income doing the heavy lifting, what is it? Let's look at where the failure actually happens, because most people are not failing at earning. They're failing at a step nobody ever explained to them. Here's the median again, but this time for retirement accounts, and it is genuinely rough. The average 401k balance in this country is about $168,000. Sounds okay-ish, right? Except there it is again. The lopsided bar trick. That average is Bezos walking into the retirement account bar, dragging the number up while everyone else nurses a much smaller drink. The median 401k, the one in the actual middle, is around $44,000. 3 out of 4 people have less than the so-called average, and it gets more brutal the closer you look at people who should be ready. For households right on the doorstep of retirement, ages 55 to 64, the median retirement balance is about $107,000. That is supposed to last 20-30 years. Calling that a nest egg is generous. That's a nest egg that skipped a few meals and is afraid to open its mail. Now, part of this is a savings problem, and I want to be fair about that, but I also want to be fair about how small the margins really are. The personal savings rate in America right now is hovering around 3%, 3 cents of every dollar, and a huge chunk of the country literally cannot save more because there's nothing left after rent, groceries, insurance, and gas. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans couldn't cover a surprise $1,000 expense from savings. More than a quarter have no emergency savings at all. So when a financial guru wags a finger and says just skip the lattes, understand that for a lot of these households, there were never any lattes, the cushion was gone before the coffee. And I want to slow down here. because that 3% isn't an abstraction. It's a feeling, and you might know it intimately. It's the feeling of checking your balance before you tap your card at the grocery store. It's doing quiet arithmetic in the school pickup line about whether the field trip money and the electric bill can both survive the same week. It's putting one thing back on the conveyor belt while the person behind you politely pretends not to notice. It's the 2 a.m. ceiling staring where you calculate for the fourth time whether the check engine light can wait until the next paycheck. That is what a 3% savings rate actually feels like from the inside. It isn't laziness. It's a math problem you were handed and told to solve alone, in the dark, with the wrong tools. But here's where it gets really interesting, and by interesting I mean maddening. Even the people who do have room to invest routinely sabotage themselves, and not because they're dumb, because they're human. There's a long-running study tracking what the average investor actually earns versus what the market hands out for free, and over the last couple of decades, the average investor trailed the market by more than a full percentage point every single year. Some years, way more. In one recent year, the gap was over 8 percentage points. Why? Because when the market drops, people panic and sell. When it rockets up, they get greedy and pile in. They buy high, they sell low, over and over, guaranteeing they capture the fear and miss the recovery. Which brings us to the actual engine. The thing Joel understood and Trevor never did. Compounding, and I need you to really see this, because it is the whole ballgame. And before you tell me 7% sounds made up, it isn't. Over the last century, the broad American stock market has returned somewhere around 10% a year on average before inflation, and roughly 7% after inflation eats its share. Nobody had to pick a genius stock to get that. You just had to own the whole thing and refuse to flinch. That's the number Joel quietly rode for 30 years while Trevor was busy trying to time it. Outsmart it, and honestly, mostly ignore it. Let's do the math on becoming a millionaire from nothing. If you invest and earn a roughly 7% return and you start at age 30, you need to put away about $610 a month to hit $1 million by retirement. Totally doable for a lot of households. Not easy, but doable. Now watch what happens when you wait. Start the exact same plan at 40 instead of 30, and that number jumps to about $1,300 a month. Wait until 50? Now you need over $3,200 a month to get to the same finish line. Same destination. But every decade you wait roughly doubles the toll because you've stolen years away from the one ingredient compounding actually runs on, which is time. And here's the cruelest, most beautiful detail about time in the market. Almost all of the market's gains come from a tiny handful of days. If you had $10,000 invested for the last 20 years and you stayed put the whole time, you'd have ended up with around $72,000. But if you got scared and jumped out and happened to miss just the 10 best days out of 20 years, you'd have less than half that. Miss a few more of those days and you'd have barely broken even. And the killer is that those explosive best days almost always land right next to the scariest worst days. So the people who panic and sell during the crash miss the rebound by a matter of hours. Joel never sold. Joel honestly barely looked. That was the entire strategy. Do nothing for 30 years on purpose. Now, I could stop here and say, see, just invest early and don't panic, and pretend this is a story about personal willpower. But that would be a lie, and you'd smell it. Because for millions of people, the reason they never become millionaires has nothing to do with discipline and everything to do with a system that quietly locked the door before they arrived. Let me show you what I mean. That whole beautiful compounding machine, the 401k, the automatic contributions, the employer match, all of it, 42% of full-time workers don't have access to any workplace retirement plan at all. None, and it breaks exactly along the lines you'd expect. Among the lowest earners, nearly 79% have no access. Among the highest earners, it's 18%. So the single most powerful wealth-building tool in American life, the tax breaks, the free matching money. The effortless automatic investing is handed out most generously to the people who already need it least. It's like a government program that hands out free umbrellas, but only to the people already standing indoors. The folks getting rained on don't qualify. That's not a personal failing, that's the architecture of the thing. And then there's the ground everyone's standing on, which has been quietly tilting for 40 years. Since about 1980, wages for the typical worker have barely crawled. Meanwhile, housing has gotten dramatically more expensive relative to income, healthcare has outrun paychecks by a mile, and college costs have gone completely feral. A home used to cost around 3 times the typical household's income. Now it's over 5 times. So the money that previous generations had left over to invest, the surplus that fed the compounding machine, has been steadily eaten by the basic cost of having a roof, a body, and a degree. You're not imagining it. The gap between the raise you got and the life it's supposed to buy is real and measurable. When your parents tell you they bought their first house at your age on one salary, they're not lying and they're not smarter than you. They just happen to be standing in the economy before the floor tilted. Same effort, different physics. Stack it up and the picture is clear. You can only ride the wave if you already own a surfboard, so the last few decades of soaring home and stock prices didn't lift the people with no assets, it left them further behind. It's why the wealth gaps between different groups aren't closing. The typical white family holds several times the wealth of the typical black or Hispanic family, and when assets boom, that dollar gap doesn't shrink. It widens. Booms reward the people who are already in. So if you've been sitting there this whole time feeling a low hum of shame, feeling like everyone else got a manual you never received, I need you to hear this. You are not the problem. A 3% savings rate is not a national character flaw. It's the mathematical fingerprint of an economy where the essentials eat the paycheck before the paycheck can build anything. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. It just wasn't designed for you. By the way, real quick, since we're talking about building something from zero in a rough economy, I opened a school community where I break down exactly this kind of thing. How to grow real income streams and stay on the right path, even when the whole system feels stacked against you. It's completely free, even if you're starting from nothing. The link's in the description if that's something you want. Okay, so the system is tilted, the door is locked for a lot of people, and the math is unforgiving. Where does that leave you specifically right now? It leaves you somewhere more hopeful than it sounds, and I mean that. Because here's the strange twist at the center of all of this, and it's the thing I promised you back at the start was almost insulting. The recipe is stupidly simple. It is genuinely one of the most boring recipes in the entire world. Buy a low-cost fund that owns basically the whole market. Put money in every single month automatically so you never have to feel brave, and then do the single hardest thing a human being can do, which is nothing. Don't sell when it drops. Don't get clever. Don't try to beat it. That's it. That's the secret the boat salesmen don't want framed on your wall. Congratulations, you just learned the entire strategy in one sentence, and it's somehow less exciting than assembling a piece of flat pack furniture. And I know exactly what you're thinking, because I'd be thinking it too. You're thinking, Nick, that's fine for someone with money left over at the end of the month, but I don't have $600 a month lying around. And you might be completely right. That's the honest part nobody says. If the margin isn't there yet, the answer isn't to hate yourself. It's to know precisely what the game actually is, so that the moment even a little room opens up, a raise, a paid-off car, a side income, you point it straight at the machine instead of straight at a nicer version of Trevor's boat. Because that's the real difference between our two guys. It was never about the size of the shovel. Trevor had a bigger shovel every year of his life. Joel just started digging earlier in the same spot and refused to stop, refused to panic, and refused to let a good salary trick him into thinking he was already rich. Trevor spent 30 years looking wealthy. Joel spent 30 years quietly being wealthy, and the two are almost never the same people. So no, most people will never become millionaires, and a lot of that genuinely isn't their fault. The plans are locked away from the people who need them most. The wages stalled, the essentials got greedy. That's all true, and pretending otherwise is an insult. But some people do make it, and when they do, it almost never looks like the boat. It looks like a chemistry teacher in a 12-year-old Camry who did the boring thing for a very long time and told nobody. The math is brutal, but it isn't a secret and it isn't magic. It's just early, boring, and relentless, applied to whatever room you can carve out. And if you can find even a little of that room, that quiet, unglamorous room, and start pointing it at the future instead of the boat, then 30 years from now, you get to be the person nobody realized was rich the whole time. If you want help finding that first little bit of room, that school community is waiting. Either way, start today. Because the one thing you can never buy back later is time.